And welcome to another episode of Experts Speak. I am Michael DeLon. Today I'm talking with Bradley Hamner. Bradley, thank you, sir, for being with me today.
Michael, it's great to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, you are welcome. It's going to be a great conversation. Bradley runs a company called Blueprint OS. And what they do is they help entrepreneurs, business owners design, build, and install an operating system for your business that runs without you. And I think this is going to be a phenomenal conversation because I think, honestly, Bradley, that's kind of the dream of entrepreneurs when they get into business.
Mm.
And then they get into business and realize, oh, it's a whole lot more challenging than I ever thought. So I can't wait to help you listen to you unpack this and provide value to my audience. So tell me, Bradley, I mean, how in the world did you get doing what you're doing today?
Well, I'm going to take you briefly back to whenever I was growing up with my father. My dad is a small business owner. He's a farmer in agriculture business. And when you're in agriculture, a lot of things are caught, not taught from your dad. And one of the biggest things I picked up from my father is the value of hard work. I mean, when you
Mm,
see your dad working 7 days a week in the fields, I mean, they farm even to this day almost 10,000 acres of
wow.
land. And so, with that, it came at a sacrifice. I mean, he missed a lot of my games, and he certainly wasn't coaching my teams
Hmm.
back then. But I really value and appreciate what my dad shared with me about what it means to actually work hard. So I took that skill and the ability to sell. My early career out of college was in sales jobs. So I took
Hmm.
sales and the value of hard work into my very first business in 2010. And that's exactly what that business needed, was my energy and my juice to get the thing lift into the business. The problem is eventually I ran out of time. And so 5 years into the business, by being the rainmaker, now I didn't have the language around it then, but I really built that business 100% off my back, my network. I burned out. I had a health scare and I knew something needed to change, but I honestly did not know what it needed to be. I mean, when the only lever you've pushed on for years is to work harder and harder and harder,
Yeah.
and the business is plateauing, and there's no other, you can't go any harder, then what do you do? And
Right.
so you and I were mentioning this, but systems and processes. I found myself in Toronto at Strategic Coach, as a matter of fact. And we're
Yeah.
doing this exercise, which is now portrayed in the book. 10x is easier than 2x. I'm sitting next to an entrepreneur, and he said, last year we did 40 million and I made 5 million personally. So here's what 400 million and 50 looked like. I was like, wait, what? How much did you make?
Say that again.
And he was like in an adjacent industry, basically. So it wasn't a far departure. And so I had an idea of what I thought he did. And so when he shared that with me, I was like, wait, that's unbelievable. And so he said something that I've heard for years. He said, look, it's just systems and processes. And I said something smart back to him and said, I'm so sick and tired of hearing that. Everybody talks about it, and nobody ever shows me what it actually looks like. And he said,
Hmm.
well, at lunch, I'll show you. And that changed everything. And so finally, for the first time forever, my mindset was like, oh, that's actually how you build a $40 million company. And look, I didn't pick up the principles from him. I just began to see how
Yeah.
he got his business out of his head. And he said, this is what I did to be able to build this company. And so from there on, I began to make the changes for me inside me personally. And then, of course, we began to actually create systems and processes. We put those together in a set of playbooks that now form a comprehensive operating system. And I've been able to grow and scale multiple companies since then. And that's what we share with other people to do today.
I love it. I love it. Systems and processes. And you're right. Yeah, we hear that all the time, but it's actually bringing it down to the playbooks. And I don't know, you probably don't know this about us. So, we help clients create books, but then we teach them marketing systems, and they're all in a game plan, and they all have playbooks, and they're step-by-step guides that our clients implement and execute. And it's a
Yeah.
lot like you're a Auburn fan, right? When they take the field, the coach has a playbook for that game. He studied the competition, and he has plays that he's going to run offensively, defensively, so that he can change and move with the changing tide. Sorry. And it sounds like that's what you help business owners do with a game plan and playbooks so that they can run their business. Is that a fair kind of summary?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to your point, even there's a lot of so many words that kind of get thrown around: systems, process, playbooks, process, procedure. And there's just so many different things, checklist. And I was like, what does this mean? And so I had to go through my own journey. And the more I did Google search, the more confused I got, if I'm honest. Okay. One person called it a process, one person called it this. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. I'm just going to have to actually go through and think about what this actually means. And so
Yeah.
now we know that the thing forms a comprehensive OS. I mean, our language that our clients will use is you've got to go build and install an OS into the business, something that exists outside of you. And let me just share with you, and this is important. We actually tell people that you may not have realized it, but the business was running on an OS. See, mine was for years. It was just a Bradley OS.
Oh,
It was a
yeah.
UOS. Everything was in my head. Everything was in my head. And so I was the operating system for the business. And again, I want to be very clear. It worked up until it didn't work. And so
Right.
most of the time, we have found that that plateau happens somewhere between a $500,000 in revenue to maybe somebody can get it close to 1 million. Maybe.
Yeah.
Depending on the industry, depending on your business, you might be able to get it to 1 million. I'm working with a client right now, came aboard. His name's Cody, incredible business owner, entrepreneur. He is the prototypical rainmaker in the business. He's exactly where I was. He's got it to about half a mil, no, about 750. And there's no chance he's going to get it to 1 million, 1.2, 1.5 if he continues to do what he's doing now. And I
Yeah.
told him, listen, you've gotten past where most people are able to get it off of your back alone. Do you really want to take this company to 1.5 million? And
Yeah.
he said, yeah, absolutely, I do. Do you think doing it continuously the same way you're doing it today is going to get there? He said, there's no chance. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no chance I can do it. And so that's what we help people to do.
Yeah. That's great. And that's a great picture of where a lot of business owners are as they ramp up. And one of my I don't know if it's a pet peeve, bane of my existence, whatever you call it, is all of the coaches out there saying, we'll help you scale to a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 figure business, right? And the reality is, you and I both know that's not going to happen without systems and processes in place. And they have these shiny objects that everybody's running after to buy the program to go, uh,
Yeah.
foiled again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's totally backwards of what you do because you're coming in and saying, okay, let's take you and build. And I love the fact that you're working with business owners 500,000 to almost 1 million because that's the sticky point. That's when, yeah, you hit the ceiling going. A marketing guy that I followed for 35 years, Roy Williams, talks about a business will grow to the length of your shadow, which is
Hmm.
just another way of saying what you've said is that's as far as it's going to go, Cody,
Yeah.
unless we change and install an operating system that you can manage. Let's talk about some of those components, some of those things that you're going to help Cody and other people do. What are some of the components of these systems process, the mindset around your operating system, your Blueprint OS?
Yeah, I'd actually like to walk you through a framework that we have
Mhm.
that called scale. Now, you may say, wait a minute, that word gets thrown around, but we use it as an acronym. So let me, if you don't mind, I'll walk you through our scale framework, and hopefully this will kind of land with your clients. Number one, S is sustainable revenue, and what we mean by sustainable revenue is specifically getting the business to greater than $1 million in top line revenue.
Mhm.
Everybody we work with is doing at least $300,000 in revenue up to about 3 million whenever they come to work with us. I think that first 300,000, like you've just got to get enough lift into the business. And honestly, I don't even think you need an OS. Go sell something.
That's
Just go
right.
sell something. Okay. But at some point, okay, in the journey, you've got to begin to change. And we'll talk about that. So number one, though, for a lot of people, a lot of business owners, getting to 1 million is absolutely a huge milestone. In fact, 91% of businesses never cross $1 million in top line revenue.
Yeah.
So if you've busted that milestone marker, it is a huge deal. And for many people listening to this, that may already be over 1 million. If you are, the second part, which gets into C, and that's consistent profitability and growth. And we measure that by a thing called the rule of 40. So you take your year over year growth plus your profitability, and we want that to be 40 or more. Your year over year growth percentage plus your profit, we want that to be 40 or more because everybody we work with is bootstrap. We don't take on outside investment. This is not private equity money. If you take on PE money, they don't care about anything except growth. They
Yeah.
don't even care about profitability because they'll give you more money. But
Yeah.
as a bootstrapped entrepreneur, everybody we work with, you got to have a business that is not only doing more than a million, but you want it to continue to be growing and profitable. And that's the C
Yeah.
in scale. Now
Love
let's
it.
get into the A. If you're doing all that and you're like I was in 2015, working around the clock 7 days a week, what good is it worth, right? Because we all have interest outside of work. So we say, do you have enough time away? And that's the A in scale.
Mm.
Specifically, we encourage our members to take 12 weeks off. Now, somebody listen to this and gonna go, 12 weeks? Are you kidding me? I don't want to take 12 weeks off. Well, the way that we guide people through, it's actually a lot more approachable than what you think. Here's the biggest thing, whether you want to take 12 or not, having enough time away from the business to rest and recharge allows the time that you are working to be much more fruitful. Okay, so do
100%.
you have enough time away?
Love it.
Let's get into the L in scale, and that is leverage, but leverage specifically with an executive assistant. We think as a business owner, it is not a luxury to have an EA. We actually think it is a necessity to have an executive assistant. If you want to work on the things that actually accelerate the business forward, as Dan Martell says, and we love him, he spoke at one of our events, you have to buy back your time. And $1 million business isn't built on $10 task.
There
And
you
so if
go.
you don't have an EA, you are one. So you need to create leverage with an executive assistant. So first, we got a business doing over a million sustainable revenue. C, it's consistent and it's growing. We've got enough time away. We're working on the things we need to work on in the business because we have an executive assistant. And then what's the last part? We need efficient operations, and we do that by designing, building, and installing an OS into the business. So that is efficient operations. So that's our scale framework, SCALE.
I love that. That's probably the first time somebody's talked about scaling a business that I actually like because it's systematic. It's here's what we need to do. And the away time, yeah, I just finished my first year in strategic coaching. You know, what's the first thing they tell you is free days, right? How many free days?
Yeah.
160 free days. You're like, what? But I figured out it's not as hard as it seems, but the free days away from the business really do rejuvenate you so that when I'm coming back in, my buffer and focus days are much better. I've got a team that does a lot of stuff for me, and it makes business so much more fun and enjoyable
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not only equipping people so that I have the free time and I do what I'm best at, my team is doing what they're best at, right?
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that's how we really build a long business that benefits not just us, not just our customer, but our team members as well. And when you focus and realize my number one client are my team members, serving them, helping them, equipping them, that's where my business has continued to grow. So I love the scale model there.
The only thing I think I would add to that, and for people listening, kind of hear me out for just a second as I say this. I think the number one thing to do though is actually you have to lead yourself first. So even before your team, and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
dare say, even before your family,
Yeah.
you have to take care of yourself. And in planes, whenever they say put your oxygen mask on first,
Right.
because if you don't do that, you can't help others. So here's the thing. It's not about selfishness. It's actually the most selfless thing for me to show up for
Mm-hmm.
you on your podcast today, making sure that I slept well, that I feel good today to be able to bring the right kind of energy for my family this afternoon when the kids get out of school, et cetera. How do I show up for my team the rest of the day, et cetera? It's because I put my oxygen mask on first. And for everybody else, that looks a little different. I mean, some people like to do yoga, some people like to walk, some people like to meditate, some people like to spend more time in prayer, some people like to go and lift and work out. Whatever that is for
Yeah.
you, that's not my job to even suggest what that should be. But I think you have to be able to lead yourself first. And so the journey for myself was like, I got to take care of me. I got to get me right. Because if I don't get me right, I can't serve my team and we're not going to have an impact to the customers that we want to have.
That's right. 100% agree. You always start with yourself and then it moves down there because yeah, if you're sick and better in the hospital, guess what? If you don't have a good operating system, the whole thing goes and nobody benefits then. So yeah,
Yeah,
you
very true.
always have to start with yourself and then having this model, this scale model here and an operating system that it's something that people can get their head around and that you help. And I want you to unpack this. How do you work with entrepreneurs? Because it's one thing. I mean, great. Thanks for your scale thing. How do I do it? Right. Because entrepreneurs are so busy. We don't know what to do. Even if you give me the framework and probably the playbooks, I just sometimes have questions and I don't know. And it's like, oh, I'll deal with that later. And it
Yeah,
never
yeah, for
gets
sure.
done. How do you,
Yeah.
how do you actually work with, how do you get it done with clients?
Yeah, a lot of people do ask me like, okay, that makes sense. That's logical. I get it. Their journey is maybe a little different than mine, but they can somewhat see themselves in my story. And so like, what do you actually do? Okay, first of all, the very first thing, it's actually an identity shift. It's an
Mhm.
identity shift that you see yourself differently. Instead of seeing yourself as the rainmaker where you do all the things, see yourself first as the architect of your business. Our members will start to have vernacular and language that changes, that they will say, how do I architect this? How do I build this? How do I design
Good.
this? And that is a fundamental, and that's a huge thing. I mean, for somebody listening to this today, when something comes to you, you think, how could I design this? What would an architect of business do? Okay,
Yeah.
that is huge in and of itself. But secondly, let me give you a very tactical thing that something people can do. A lot of times they'll say, like, I mean, we even teach our members exactly how to structure your Google Documents, okay, as an example. I mean, that's the
Yeah.
level of detail that I had questions about. And a lot of our members say, you know what? Actually, y'all's documents are actually really beautiful. And we're just going to copy and paste exactly how you format your documents or
Yeah.
Word, it doesn't matter. But
Right.
and so people do that because those are the questions I had of like, how do we create consistency in some of those? But before you even go through and need to start creating new documents, I would encourage people to adopt this idea that we have Rembrandts in the attic. And what I mean by that is you have already, if you've been in business a minute, you've created assets in the business that are very valuable. The problem is they're just placed in places that people can't find them. So everybody's on a scavenger hunt. Everybody's like, wait a minute, where is this asset? Nobody can find what it is that we're looking for. And so the analogy is whenever you do your laundry, you don't go to the dryer and start randomly putting clothes in different places, put jeans under the kitchen sink and you put socks in the
Right.
kids' playroom. You don't do that. Obviously, it's ridiculous. Why? It's because whenever you go to get dressed in the morning, you're going to go to the sock drawer because that's where the socks are. The
Yep.
same thing is true with an OS. They have to be able to find where things are. So, what we actually encourage people to do is one of the very, very best things is you do like a spring cleaning of your current documentation, like create an archive folder, Google Drive, Dropbox, whatever you use,
Yep.
Microsoft, and you start to drop all the assets, all the documents that you've created over these years that you don't use anymore. Let's just go and dump them. We don't have
Sure.
to delete them. We're just going to put them in an archive folder. And then you have an organizing system of
Hmm.
where to begin to find the documents. We haven't created any new documents yet, but we need to organize the ones that we have first. So, first, you got to see yourself as the architect. Number two, do some spring cleaning for your digital files, your assets that you have, so that we can actually find and everybody's on the same page of where things are.
That's great. I love Rembrandt's in the attic. I love that.
Mhm.
Um, but the identity shift really is a mindset shift because as something happens, I know in our business, my eldest son Caleb, he's my chief operating officer. So he's the systems guy. He builds all kinds of stuff. And he and I are talking all the time. And when something happens in the business, we're like, okay, let's figure this out. Let's build a system because this is not going to be the only time this happens, whatever this thing is. Let's figure out how we're going to address it based on everything else. Let's build a system, put it into the document. There it is. We fix it once, and now every other time it follows the system, and the system can get tweaked down the road, right? But I guess we're the architects because we've learned over time that's what you do. And he's brilliant, and he's created 138 systems or whatever it is that the business runs on. And
Yep.
and we just had his executive assistant said, I need a 6 month sabbatical for some personal things. And we went, okay. And we found another one, another executive assistant, and his executive assistant, Sophia, is training the new executive assistants because it's systems.
Yeah. Right.
And I thought, isn't that how it's supposed to work?
Yeah. So
It's
let me double tap on several things you mentioned there because I think it's really important. Number one, the fact that you have your CEO, your son, is got an EA. I think that's incredibly important because that's allowing him to focus on the things that actually accelerate the business forward
yes,
and not just getting stuck and mired into the weeds. And secondly, you absolutely, when you think that way, let's go create a system. That is being the architect. And that's
yeah,
what we're trying to suggest to people is that it changes the way that you think about it. Instead of I'm just going to go do the thing, right?
sure, yeah,
Most of the things we do in business, almost, I mean, 90+% of them, we do them over and over and over again. You
yeah,
know, there are occasionally, we had one yesterday that was unique. We had never actually encountered that thing before. We did not have a system around it. And I said, okay, we need not only need to assign ownership of who's going to own this thing now, we also need to create a system around it. How do we handle this
yeah,
in the future? Specifically, an email that comes in to the support inbox. We've not had this particular response come through before,
right,
so we didn't have a system built around it. The third thing I want to share with you is the very first EA that I had. So 2015 was when I had my health scare, and then late that year, I was in Toronto at Strategic Coach, had that experience. And it was the next year I hired my very first EA.
mm-hmm.
Didn't have anything documented. Okay. I didn't have anything documented. Now I'm in the process of creating and learning this kind of stuff. She's full time. I didn't need a full time EA at the time, but I didn't know any better. So I hired a full time EA. And so we're going through, and she's like, what do you want me to do? And so she's setting appointments for me, which is not bad. I mean, that was a higher leverage value task for me to do. And we start continuing to build this system for appointments, what to do before, what happens when they come in, what do I say, then what happens post appointment. We're getting a pretty good system. Well, by 3 months into it, this thing is actually humming. 11 months later, she leaves. And as soon as she walked out the door, I was like, oh my gosh, I did it again. I did it again. All that IP, all
Yeah,
of that time of training her walked right out the door. And I remember like slamming my fist on the table. And I was like, doggone it. I did it again. I messed up again. So it took me time to
yeah,
get to this place of like, I have got to document what it is we do.
yeah,
Lastly, I was on an interview yesterday. We're actually interviewing someone who's going to possibly move from Colorado to work inside one of my companies. And as we're on the call, we had our recruiting system document up. I asked a question that was not on that document. And I was like, I think I'm going to ask that question in the future. I typed it into that document as I was doing it,
yeah,
not setting myself a task to do it later.
yeah.
As I was doing it, I was updating it.
Absolutely. Isn't it glorious when you can function that way? And it's because you think like an architect and you
Yep.
understand the value of systems in order to scale the business because you're running on a OS, right? And it's the thing I love about this, Bradley, is it's not rocket science.
No,
This really is simple. It's just not easy. It's not intuitive unless you've spent the time, had the school of hard knocks. And that's why people need to work with you to say, okay, how do we do this? And I want my audience to understand this probably is not a purple pill weekend retreat. This is a process to move your business in a place that in the next 1 to 3 to 5 years, you've got this thing humming because you're going to be in your business for the next 25, 30 years. Let's do the work. Let's build something that's repeatable, that's scalable, that flexes and grows and modifies it. Is that a fair summary?
it is. It is. It is realistically, if you think that you're going to build an OS or really upgrade your OS and have all the things documented in 3 months, my marketing would probably be better if I said we can help you build an OS in 90 days
Yeah.
The reality is it's not possible unless you're just going to put a timeout, stop your operations, and go sit down and do that. It's not going to happen. You have to allocate enough amount of your time, and you bring in your team too, to get the business out of your head. You've got
Yeah.
to get the business out of your head. I want to share something with you that I haven't made a comment on yet, but I think it's important based on you said it's not intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
We got in business for freedom, flexibility, and to make money.
Mm-hmm.
I got in business for I wanted to do what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, with who I wanted to do it, and I wanted to have the money to do so. I wanted some level, whatever you want to call all that freedom. I got into business for that. I was in the corporate world. I could have stayed in the corporate world and been successful and moved all the way up. In fact, 2015, 5 years into it, I almost felt like going back because I was so frustrated with my business at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so grateful I did not do that. But here's the paradoxical thing. You get into this dilemma. We got into it freedom, flexibility, and income potential. And yet here's this person saying systems, processes, structure, routine. It can feel a little confining.
Yeah.
And so what I had to come to a realization, I wish I kind of knew when this moment happened for me. I don't recall when it happened. Maybe it was more of an gradual, is that I realized everything I wanted was on the other side of
Yeah.
structure, process, and routine. And so I kind of was like, I think it's Ryan Holiday says, like, this is the way. This
Yeah.
is the way. And so I was like, well, my business can stay at about 600,000. That's where we were at the time. And that's where it's going to stay right there. But if I want more, I'm going to have to change.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to slay this dragon at some point. So I'm going to figure it out. Now, for me, unfortunately, it took a health scare for me to wake up and for me to fortunately be around someone where that moment was like everything kind of lined up for me. I don't want people to have to go through that experience that I did to begin to say, I want to become the architect of my business. I want a business that's doing more than $1 million, that's growing and profitable, that I get to do what I love to do in the business. I'm taking adequate time off. And this thing is not running on me, it's running on an OS. And
Amen.
people, most of the people we work with, that's what they, well, actually all the people we work with, that's what they want. They say, yes, that's exactly what I want. I want to become the architect of my business, and I'm ready to go through that journey.
Yeah. That's awesome. All right. So for those who are listening who are itching to say, yes, this is what I've been waiting for because I'm tired of all the other junk that's out there. I'm looking for a path. I'm looking for some help. Some kind of Bradley, where do they go to find more about you, your company? How do they reach out?
So if you're doing 300,000 at least up to 3 million in revenue, if you're in that space, we'd love to chat with you. We can go to blueprintos.com/assets, blueprintos.com/assets, and we have a starter kit. And in that starter kit, there are some free downloads, but then there's also video training with the assets along with it. So sometimes if you get a PDF or get a sheet, but you don't know how to use the thing, it's not as valuable.
Right.
But in our Rainmaker to Architect starter kit, I kind of walk you through and even show you exactly how to structure even the folders in your system so that you can take the assets you already have, your Rembrandts in the attic, and begin to put them somewhere. So if they go there, and then there's a link in there if they want to book a call with myself or somebody on our team.
Awesome. We're going to have that in the show notes. Blueprintos.com/assets. That's where you get a starter kit. That's the best place for you to go so you can start connecting with Bradley and his team and see if working with them is the right way for you to go to create a system, an operating system for your business that will actually help you scale, going back to your acronym, and really create the business and life that you're looking for and become the architect of your business and the confidence that you're going to have when that day arrives. As you're walking through this, it's really more about your internal confidence to go, wow, I can do this. I'm doing it. I could do it again,
Hmm.
right? If the world went kaput, could you start all over? Well, when you understand Blueprint OS and how to do it, absolutely is the answer. So, Bradley, man, thanks for doing what you do. Thanks for creating Blueprint OS and helping businesses understand how to walk through this and making it super understandable. Thanks for being my guest today. I really, really have enjoyed the conversation, man.
Michael, you're a pro. Thank you so much for the opportunity.